One, Andy, can you give us a quick 30-second overview of the ACF delivery process?
Yeah, sure. So from the outset of a project, we tend to approach every project in a fairly consultative manner. So we'll always start with a requirements gathering exercise with one of our consultants, which takes place after obviously we've had a sales handover. That requirements gathering exercise is aimed to be for both us and for the client to agree on what exactly is going to form part of the delivery of the project. After we've completed all the requirements gathering, that will again get handed off onto the project team. So the project team is a shared team. Essentially, you get a dedicated project manager as any client, and then depending on what those requirements have outlined, there'll be a mixture of development and implementation activities. So the first stage for us, if there is any, will be a development phase. So if there are any customizations that are required for the project, that will go for our dev team. And then quickly after that, we'd obviously move into actually user acceptance testing. So before that, we might have done some implementation and configuration, obviously, but we'll be aiming to get it onto a test box for which our clients can sign off and accept the requirements that we all agreed to. Then after the testing phase is finished from the client, we'll move into pushing towards a go live and an implementation. So that generally always gets taken on by the project and implementation teams. The dev teams at that point step aside, and once we've had approval for that implementation and delivery, we'll go live. And after that, it gets handed on to our support teams.
Could you talk a little bit more about how we gather requirements, seeing that we serve quite a variety of customers?
Yeah, so like I mentioned in the delivery, we really try to take a consultative and a partnership approach. And because we have a really flexible platform, we like to undertake a fairly thorough requirements gathering exercise. So one of our business analysts will sit with our client teams, our client project, both from a business perspective and an IT perspective, to understand exactly what the goals of the project are and how best to implement those in our Qflow platform. So really it is an end-to-end consultative piece, and the ultimate goal of that is to end up with a functional and business requirements document that our clients can then sign off. We can give to our delivery teams, our implementation development teams, and we can implement it. And then ultimately, obviously, we'll aim for the client to accept that through their own user acceptance testing.
When you outlined our delivery process, you mentioned about development. Could you quickly expand on what that development process looks like from ACF?
Yeah, so it doesn't apply to all projects, but some of our projects have an element of customization. And that customization can be done by our development teams. So with every project, especially ones that involve customization, our client would get a dedicated project manager. So that project manager has obviously taken the requirements that our business analyst team has put together, and they would have passed them on to the development team. And that's effectively like a fully managed service from our perspective, if you like. So our development teams will then go ahead, implement the customizations as the client wishes, and then pass them on to our implementation teams as packaged up elements. So those packaged up elements can be put into place by either our implementation team or sometimes the client's implementation team as well. But the idea is that it's a completely segregated piece of customization that can be reused and upgradable into the future.
Andy, could you tell us a little bit more about how you handle testing and release management into different environments?
Yeah, so obviously every project varies. So most of the time we'd have with a project a development environment, a test environment, and obviously a production environment. So let's assume that we have a dev and a test environment that ACF are in control of. We'll manage the releases into those environments. Obviously, ultimately, the test environment is what's going to be used by the client. So we would deploy any customizations and configurations into that test environment. And yeah, we'd provide a complete release package, including release notes to detail exactly what we've delivered. So if the client was to ever take it on themselves, they can do so. And we'll obviously give a full test report that our QA teams have put together. So that can be a mixture of, that may involve some performance testing, it may involve penetration testing, maybe just functional testing, but ultimately that's something that our project teams will agree with the client at the time. And then when it comes to eventually putting into a production environment, that's really just down to our clients themselves. So we have some clients that prefer to own their own environment. Maybe they're hosting it themselves instead of us hosting it for them, in which case we would supply them full installation packages and installation instructions so the clients can manage that release cycle themselves.
And last but not least, Adi, could you quickly explain a little bit more about the actual go live process and the aftercare process for our solutions?
Yeah, so go live, a bit like our previous subject of release management, we can do either approach. So either the ACF teams, implementation teams can deploy to the live environment, or the client can do it themselves. That really depends on who owns the environment. So yeah, we can do it, or the client can. And then once that's complete, signed off, and we're live, we'll have a short period of warranty. So typically that's a couple of weeks where your dedicated project team would still be the first point of contact if you have any issues. But then after that, we'll look to transition into more of a business as usual operation. So our UK-based support teams would take on the delivery. So they'd be fully briefed and get a handover from the project implementation team. And then you'll get a dedicated email address and phone number for which you'd relay any issues after the implementation's been signed off and the warranty period has ended.